Today's date is the 20th of October 2021, and thank you for welcoming me here at Hampstead Garden Suburb Shul. Today I'm going to be talking about the Parsha. This week's Sedra is Parshas Vayeira, and we learn a lot of things, but I would like to focus on Lot, who's quite an enigmatic character, and I've got a lot of things to say about him, but we only have 45 minutes, so we'll keep it at that. If anyone wants to stay behind afterwards, they can. Now, it's very interesting because Esther used two words when she spoke about her mother, that she was kind to people, and she spoke about stranger danger, which is quite interesting because it's a lovely segue to talking about Lot, because I don't know what background people have got. I'd like to just focus on a little story that's in this week's Parsha and about Lot. So Lot is the nephew of Avraham. He is Sarah's brother, and Avraham sort of adopts him when he moves on his journey, Lech Lecha, and he takes him with him wherever he goes. And so the story that I'd like to look at now is chapter 19, Perek Yotes of Bereshis, and here we have a story of Lot, and he sees two angels coming to Sodom, which is the place where he lives. So if you see the first page, it says lots about Lot on the top of it. Was Lot really being hospitable? So have a look at that. Let's look at that story together. Vayavo shnei hamalachim Sodoma Bearev, v'Lot yoshev b'shar Sodom. And two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. Lot saw them, and he got up to greet them, and he bowed down with his face to the ground. You should have this piece of paper. Yeah, actually, it looks more like that. It's got Hampstead Garden Suburb logo on it. Right. Verse 2. And he said, "Please, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and stay overnight, wash your feet, get up early and go on your way." And they said, "No thanks," I'm putting the thanks in there, more paraphrasing it, "but we will stay in the street." He urged them greatly, and they turned towards him. And they entered his house, and he made them a feast, baked matzahs, and they ate. But before they lay down, here's where it gets all very exciting. The men of the city, the men of Sodom, circled round the house, both young and old, all the people of every quarter. And they called to Lot, and they said to him, "Where are the men that came to you tonight?" So in Sodom, hospitality was like the biggest sin. No way were you allowed to invite people. That was a big no-no. Now, they found out these people have come to Lot's house. Everybody, the whole neighborhood, have come along, banging on the door, saying, "What is going on? Bring out these men to us that we may know them." Now, this is a whole complicated story, which you can invite me back next year if you want to learn more about that. We're not going to talk about it. Maybe they had intentions to have homosexual relations with them. Don't want to go there, but just you can look it up. Yeah. We don't know what he knew. We can see what Scripture tells us. The Torah says, "And two angels came." We're going to talk about that shortly. Thank you very much, Irit. That's a really interesting observation. We don't know whether he knew. And Lot went out to them to the entrance and shut the door after him. And he said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have two daughters that have not known a man." That means, we're assuming that means virgin. "Okay, let me, I pray you," or not married, "let me, I pray you, bring them out to you so you can do with them whatever you want to do. Don't do anything to my guests, because they have come under the shadow of my roof." So as I said, we're not going to talk too much about what happened with his daughters, but you can see, this is unbelievable. He's living in a place where it seems to be there's an underlying lack of respect for other people. Do not invite visitors to your town. Do not invite visitors. And if you do, you're going to literally be gunned down for it. Yet, he says, "I have to protect these visitors at the cost of his own daughter's life." Very, very strange. So why is it that Lot, who seems to be such an enigmatic character, is so willing to offer hospitality, yet his own daughters, the whole thing's a little bit strange. So what I would like to suggest is that he is hospitable, but there are very strange things going on here. Let's look together in closer detail at the story. So I'm sorry there's loads of papers, but it's so that you can take it home afterwards and look at it. You don't need to worry about having all the papers, and I'm going to be quoting. So the next thing I'm going to be looking at is source 1 on the top of page 2. Why did Lot offer to have these men come to his house, these angels come to his house, when he knew his life was at risk and he knew their life was at risk? So for that, we're going to look at what the Sforno says. He's an Italian rabbi who passed away in 1550. And he was also a philosopher and a physician. And when Lot sees these men, in verse 1, it says, I'm reading it in Hebrew for the first page, Vayar Lot, and Lot saw them, Vayokom likrosom, and he got up to meet them. So the question is, why did he get up to meet them if we were in hospitality city? This is not the place where you invite guests. So the Sforno says, Pen Yolinu Barachov. He wanted to prevent them from sleeping in the street. Kamo shehaya oz haminhag b'sha'ar ha'arim k'she'ein machnis orchim. The tradition in those neighbourhoods was not to invite visitors. And he was worried if he didn't get up and greet these people and invite them to his home, they would be left in the street. Now, if you get left in the street, there are wild animals, there are burglars, there are people, there are ruffians. We can see that Lot let them in his house and the people still came to bang on their door. So there are lots of midrashim about what the people of Sodom did. If, for example, a visitor did get let into Sodom and someone took him into their house, there's a midrash which tells us that they would say, oh, do you want to come and sleep in my house? Oh, are you a tall person? Oh, that's such a shame. You don't fit on the bed. I'll just chop off your legs. That's the sort of stories we have in Sodom. It's basically, we don't know if that story actually happened, but it's basically, we're going to do everything we can to be as inhospitable as we can. And even if we're going to pretend to be hospitable, there's going to be problems going on. So Lot seems so nice. He's inviting them to his house. Let's look more closely at verse 2. And he says, Vayomer, and he says, Hine na Adonai, please my master, Suru na el beis avdechem. Please turn aside to the house of your servant. And Rashi asks, what does it mean, suruna? It means go a different way, like turn somewhere. What does Rashi say? Source 2, Akmu est haderech levesi. Please go a roundabout, a circuitous way to my house. Derech akalason, shelo yakiru she'atem nichnosim bo. I don't want people to see that you're coming to my house. So what you want to do is, I'll tell you my address. Don't go that way. You go like this and come in round the back door because I'm going to get into trouble. So I love to have you, but the thing is, do me a favour, go round the back. Okay? Still quite nice because he still wants to invite them, but he doesn't want to get himself or them into trouble. So he says, come go round the back way. Now, there is an idea in the Midrash that maybe he was worried that he wasn't worthy for these people who maybe he saw them as angels, maybe he saw them as men, maybe there was something special, according to some of the commentators, there was something special about them, that he felt they looked different to ordinary people. Maybe he thought he was beneath their dignity and they wouldn't want to come, so he begs them to come. Eventually they come. Not too bad, doesn't look so bad, looks okay at the moment. Okay, we'll carry on from the Pasuk, and he says to them, and this is verse 2, back on the home page, sort of like chapter 19, and he says, turn around to the house of your servant, line 2, second word in, Vilinu virachatsu raglechem. Vilinu means like to stay over, virachatsu raglechem, and wash your feet. So, do you think that's normal? So, like, Mickey's really nice. She invites me to come and stay over, and she says, quickly, go in your bedroom, go to sleep, and only have a shower in the morning. Is that nice? Would you like that after you've been, like, walking in the desert for a long time?
She's being nice.
She's being nice. But why is Lot saying, go to sleep, and then tomorrow you can have a shower?
Less obvious, because they showered outside, maybe. I mean, I don't.
Right, maybe,
They
yeah.
have their own showers at home, maybe.
Yeah, but they're all wandering in the desert because his house is like, his tent was in the middle of nowhere, one would assume.
Would have had a light on and so people needed to see that there were people.
Oh, do you think he's got an immersion heater that you...
But he would have had a candle see other people in there. That if they're asleep, they're lying down, they're in the shadows, it's dark.
Right, love that. Yeah, great. Okay, but do you think it's strange if someone would say to you, you've got off, you've been walking in the desert for a few days, very strange. Rashi, the medieval commentator who passed away in 1105, he lived in Troyes in France, he says, this is very strange. This is a bit of a strange order of doing things. If you invite someone, you don't tell them, quickly go to bed. But I see what Daniela said. I like that idea that sort of like the lights are off. We don't want anyone to see what you're doing. Keep under the cover of darkness. Go to bed. And in the morning, I don't have to turn the lamps on. And I like that as well. So Rashi asks, source 3, is it customary for people to first stay all night and then wash themselves? This is what Lot thought to himself. If, when the men of Sodom come, if they come knocking on my door to say, hey, what's going on? And then they see the people who are in my house. If, so to speak, they're still wearing their muddy boots, then I can say, I don't know, they've just sort of shown up. It's like I didn't really invite them in. They've just walked in. I was just about to get rid of them. Whereas if they look all clean and they look like they're not bedraggled from the way anymore and they've all had a shower and they've shaved and they look all smart, he can't pretend that. So Lot was protecting himself and these men/angels, and he said, do me a favour, keep your muddy boots on, look dishevelled. If anyone comes here, I'll just be like, no, they've just shown up. I've tried to get rid of them. Just give me a minute, I'm just going to get rid of them. That's nice. I think Lot's trying to protect them, trying to protect himself. Right. What was he so scared about? Why were the people of Sodom so worried about having visitors? What was their big fear?
Maybe they've had bad experiences.
Bad experiences?
Jealousy.
What do you mean by jealousy?
I mean, they come and see what a lovely place it is and don't want to leave.
Right, okay, because according to the rabbis, Sodom was a very fertile place. Lots of people wanted to live there, and they had lots of money, and everybody wanted to live there. But the people in Sodom were like, this is ours. It's almost like the epitome of not allowing any immigrants in. We don't want any migrant workers. Leave us alone. And this, I'm sorry? Like Switzerland. Okay. I see what you're saying like that. Okay. Okay. The main purpose of Sodom was to scare off visitors. And the Ramban, he comments on why is it the people of Sodom wanted to get rid of any potential visitors. So number 4, their intention was to bring an end to travellers. They wanted to have a terrible reputation. They didn't want people to come because of the goodness of their land. They did not want to give charity, and they thought, how can we live in such a way that we can convince people not to come here? We don't want to give charity to anybody. We don't want to let anybody share in our bounty. Leave us alone. And I've heard a story of another midrash which says they once did give someone some charity, and each person wrote their name on a coin, and then when they went to a shop and they wanted to try and buy some food, and then the shopkeeper would look at the coin and say, oh no, he's an out-of-towner, sorry, you can't buy anything. Then he would die, and then afterwards he would be dead, and each person would come and take back their own coin, which is it's just beyond awful that they pretended they were nice, but they really were not nice at all. But still, Lot looked for visitors, and he still went out of his way. He risked his own life, which is quite incredible when you think about it. But when we start looking very closely at the story, and bearing in mind that we see he has some sort of warped sense of priorities, given that later on he wants to protect the visitors at the expense of his own daughter's life, something else is going on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to look a little bit more closely at what is going on, and then we are going to understand his character a little bit better. So we're going to read at verse 3, Posuk Gimel. Vayifsar bom ma'od, and he urged them very greatly. Vayosuru elav, it's the front page again. And he turned to them. Vayovo el beiso, and they came to his house. Vayas lahem mishteh, and he made them a feast. We'll talk about what a feast is in a minute. umatzos ofa vayochelu. Verse 3. And he baked them matzahs and they ate. What is a feast? Now, I think a feast is a feast, right? It's someone who makes a nice bar mitzvah here. That's a feast, right? But the Sephorno tells us, he's Italian, he would come out with this, that the word mishteh always has the same connotation. In modern Hebrew, the word to drink is lishdot, to drink. Mishteh is always, like we have on Purim, Su'udat Purim is a mishteh. Su'udat al hayayin, bihiyos hayayin ahuv etzlo. Lot offered them what we'll call a feast, just basically means any food with an alcoholic beverage. Why? Because Lot, which we're not going to talk about today, liked to have a little tipple. Lot was a little bit of a drunkard, and he offered, yeah?
In those days, like in Britain, surely they couldn't just drink water.
Of course, they didn't have fresh water, of course. But the rabbis tell us, why does the Torah add the word mishteh? It looks like he's making a feast. The word mishteh has a connotation of wine, okay? Because we'll see other places where they had milk. They did have water, because we know all the stories of the well. They did have water. Obviously, in ancient times, people did have, and that was preserved. It was a drink they could have. But the rabbis are looking carefully at the words in the story, and they're saying, hold on a minute, he's offering them wine. It doesn't say wine, it's subtle, but mishteh means alcoholic beverage. And we see later on, Lot is, I'm not going to talk about it today, just very briefly, Lot then lands up in a cave with his two daughters when Sodom is destroyed, and he fathers two children, one with each of his daughters. And the rabbis say, how did he get himself into that situation? They're looking for clues in the text that Mr. Lot is this warped sense of hospitality that he would, at his daughter's expense, offer them up to the mob rather than the holy protection of the.
It's the first time the matzahs are mentioned in the Torah, because it predates Pesach. We say baked matzahs.
But actually, when we sing, on Pesach we sing a song Halayla, and then every day it says Balayla. That says Matzos Ofu Vayachelu, and it says, and this time I'm not sure it's the first time that matzahs are mentioned in Tanakh. I can check that up for you.
Didn't Avraham got matzah?
So that would be in the chapter before. Okay.
But that wasn't much food, was it, matzah? The emphasis was not on...
I like that. Thank you very much, Francis. Remember the food, okay? Because he says, I'm going to make you... What does he say? Vayas lahem mishteh. He's going to make them a feast, okay? And he's saying, come into my house. So there is an opinion that tonight, this night was Pesach.
So, but this passage is complimenting him, because wine is important, no?
It is, but it is complimenting him, because he says he's making a feast and he's giving wine. But the Sephorno is criticizing, so to speak, saying he's offering them food with wine because Lot is basically an alcoholic. That's what the Sephorno is saying. But what else is telling him that? His behaviour in the cave. Because how did a person not only manage one night to sleep with one daughter, but 2 nights? So we're looking for clues in the text. But that's another whole subject.
Also the sequence, because it says Vayas lahem mishteh first.
Yes.
And then he goes about baking the matzah.
So that the mishteh, the drinking,
Would have been the first thing on an empty stomach, and the matzahs would have taken some time to arrive.
or to bake even, yeah?
To bake.
I was going to say, that's what I was going to say. It's the relevance of matzah, because it's quick to bake. He wanted to keep them... He wanted to make it very low-key and speedy.
Or maybe he was lazy. I'm not saying what it was. We don't know. There are lots of ideas. So every word is important. Every word is a jewel, and every word has a different meaning of understanding. And we can see that Lot was doing something amazing, but he was also not doing something amazing. Okay, so now let's get to the crux of the share. So it's amazing. He risked his life. His life was at stake. But Rashi comments, Vayar Lot. Okay, so the first verse, Vayar Lot saw the visitors, in the middle of the second line, Vayokom likrosam. He got up to greet them. So Rashi asks, what did Lot see? So one idea is what Irit said. They looked like, perhaps in his eyes, like malachim. They looked like angels. So if they looked like angels, he was like, whoa, these are like amazing people. I'm going to get up and go and look after them. But Rashi makes a very interesting comment. He says, from the practice in Avraham's house, he learnt to look out for strangers. What did he see? He saw how Avraham behaved. That's interesting. He spent a lot of time with Avraham. He had learned from Avraham, if you see visitors, you invite them in. And in fact, source 6 carries on and explains, I've got it, source 6 says, don't look back at source 6, look at source 8, that Avraham, in the chapter before, in verse 8, sort of chapter 18, Avraham had 3 men come to visit him, and Avraham says the words, and I'll just find you the words that Avraham says to them.
Interesting. Didn't we only learn about Abraham's hospitality when he went to Canaan and had his tent with the open sides? But by then you hear Lot is separated.
Lot separates with him in when the shepherds have the arguments. But he lived with Avraham before that, because it's a long story, but they say that Lot's father died, and Avraham sort of took him in and adopted him. So look what happens when, I'll just tell you about it, we'll look at it in detail in a minute. Avraham, chapter 18, don't worry about it. Vayeira, one second. So when Avraham invites the strangers in the chapter before, he says to them, the first thing he says to them is, come and get a bit of water be fetched, v'rachatzu raglechem, and wash your feet, v'hisha'anu tachas ha'etz, and then you can relax under the tree. Rashi comments on that verse. Hello, Lot said, go to sleep and wash your feet. Avraham, the chapter before, says, wash your feet before you come in my house, and then come inside my house. Okay, I'll show you where to look in a minute, okay? Just want to look at the Rashi, and then there's something for you to do yourself or in pairs. Rashi, source 9 on your sheet, which is on bottom of page 3. Rashi says, Avraham thought, page 3.
Page 4.
Is it page 4? I'm sorry, page 4. Rashi, Avraham thought they were Arabs who worship the dust of their feet. What does it mean, worshipping the dust of your feet? Is that a form of idolatry, perhaps? Perhaps it means where I've been or where I am going is so amazing. I am so wonderful. Hashem is not an important feature in my life. I am an important feature in my life. Where I go, I pave my own destiny and I don't need God. That Avraham was particular not to have the object of idolatrous worship brought into his house, whatever that meant, worshipping the dust of your feet. Lot, however, who was not particular about this, mentioned lodging, sleeping over, staying in the house before washing his feet, because another idea of Lot telling the people not to wash their feet. Okay, he wanted to protect the people and he wanted to protect himself from the people of Sodom. But he also, maybe, we see somehow Rashi's telling us Avraham had a different set of values. So what I want you to do now is everybody should have a piece of paper. All right, so if you prefer to do it in English, it's the back page of your handout. What I suggest you do, this is why I photocopied it in such a strange way, is pull it off like that. And then you can look at this little sheet. Everyone got this little sheet? Okay? This little table. So you want the back page in English, and you want this little table. And what I want you to do, because Rashi is begging us to compare and contrast the story of Lot and Avraham offering hospitality to the 3 visitors, I want you to look at the 2 stories. For people who want to do it in Hebrew, this is the Hebrew page, which is like the loose leaf page I gave you at the end. Okay? I'll give you a minute or two. I've given you some questions. As you go, so I'll give you let's do the first one together. Where was he sitting? Avraham in chapter 18, Lot in chapter 19. You'll see, take a pen, just circle it. Where was he sitting? You'll see that the words in the Torah are written. Where was he sitting? which visitors were seen. You can do it in Hebrew or English, whatever's easier for you. What time of the day? The time of the day is mentioned for both people. What was the food offered? Did the angels eat? And was there any family participation? Is a little bit more difficult, but see what you can do. And if you find any other comparing and contrasting. Okay, I hope everybody's had a bit of a chance to look at that. So, question 1. Where was he sitting? Avraham. Okay, so you can see it says Vahu Yoshev in Hebrew. Vahu Yoshev. It's literally the same word in Hebrew. And he was sitting. It's like two stories. It's like an English exam where someone has actually given you two stories and saying compare and contrast. It's actually what's it called? You know those games when we were little? It was like, look at these two pictures. What have I moved? Spot. That's what it is. It's spot the difference. And why is it spot the difference? The words in Hebrew are identical. Lot Yoshev b'sha'ar Sodom. Lot was sitting at the gates of Sodom. Vahu Yoshev Pesach ha'ohel. The words are identical.
I thought was quite interesting though is that an entrance is somewhere that you should go into, and a gate is something that keeps you out.
Interesting. There are lots of ideas of like why Lot was sitting there. Maybe he was a judge. I'd like to write that down. Just let me write that down. I really think that's interesting. I really like that. Appreciate
Well,
that.
I don't think so, because also when Mordechai was sitting at the gate of Shushan, it's not really that he was letting people out. That's the entrance of the...
It's not bad, but I see what you're saying. It's like almost like a sha'ar is like it's a different
The
word.
entrance is somewhere you're supposed to walk into, whereas a gate is
Potentially locked.
potentially
But in
locked.
the rabbis tell us that sha'ar usually means the entrance of a city is a place where people gathered. It was a public place, and perhaps Lot was considered to be a judge. They made him a judge. Okay, I don't know enough about it, but I think it's really interesting.
There was a gate.
That means we lock it.
We lock it. Whereas Avraham didn't have such a gate. For him, there was only an entrance. For him, there was only.
I love that idea. I love that
Those
idea.
on Midrashim, I was
Sorry?
was it last week? Those on Midrashim, the idea of the tent is the four openings. That's for the Midrash. That's not.
But she's saying what I really think it Pesach ha'ohel, the entrance of a tent. He had an entrance. It was like almost like a sign, welcome, a doormat, come inside, welcome. A gate. A sha'ar is a gate. Sha'ar is a gate. It's not an entrance. I really like what you said, and that's brilliant. You're like really noticing nuances in the text. Okay, which visitors were seen by Avraham? 3 men, Shlosha Anashim, and for Lot. Okay, look at the words. The words are so similar. Vahin in Hebrew, Hine is written both times. So it says, 1 minute. Where does it say the 2 men?
The first Aleph, Vayovu Shnei HaMelachim Sodom.
Shnei HaMelachim. Okay, Vayovu Shnei HaMelachim, V'hinei Shlosha Anashim. So, first thing, that's a difference. Why does Lot see them as angels, but Avraham sees them as men? Which was your question, Irit, right at the beginning. Do you remember you said that?
You know, what's also quite interesting is that in Hebrew it says the angels. So it's not just any people or any angels, it's the angels.
Right, and so the rabbis tell us that these angels were the very same angels who just had left the front door of Avraham and had moved on to their next journey. Okay, one stayed behind. Yes, yeah. Cool, very good. Hasmonean graduate. Okay, look at source 10. I'm so sorry about lots of pieces of paper. Rashi, in connection with Avraham, whose power was so to receive heavenly visitors was great, with whom angels visited him regularly, it calls them men. So Avraham was used to seeing heavenly visitors, these angels. So they just say the same old people that always came along, but in connection with Lot, it calls them angels, which perhaps might indicate why it is that Lot opened up his house and risked his life to invite them in. Next question, what time of the day was it? The heat of the day. Avraham was sitting outside in the middle of the day. It was boiling hot. He's boiling hot. He's just recovering from his bris milah. But yet, nevertheless, he stood outside. Maybe someone's coming at a time when travellers wouldn't travel. I don't know about you, but when I'm on holiday in Israel, I try and do my walking either early in the morning or late in the evening. People don't generally travel in the middle of the day. Now, why is Lot sitting outside Bearev in the night? because it's cool and pleasant. But the rabbis criticize almost like he only wants to do hospitality when it's night and under the cover of darkness. Now, you're right saying is like people are going to be about, they're going to be traveling, they're going to arrive in a city at night, but they also look at him in a very critical light. Okay, look just very, very quickly. It says, for the people who can read Hebrew, in verse 2, for Avraham, Vayar Vayorot Likrosam, and in Lot, in the first verse, Vayar Lot Vayokom Likrosam. It's like the same words, okay? Lot, Vayishtachavu, verse 1, Vayishtachu apayim arza, and he bowed his face to the ground. Verse, posuk base for Avraham, Vayishtachu arza, and he bowed to the ground. It's like begging you. The words are the same. Avraham did not put his face to the ground. You know, on Yom Kippur, we have the minhag to bow down, like when we do Korim and we do Achila, we put our face or we prostrate all the way down the floor. And apparently we're not supposed to do that, except in the Beis HaMikdash they did that. So almost like Avraham didn't do that, even to humans who he thought might be heavenly beings. Just you reserve that for God. And Lot, in almost very nice, he's bowing to these people, but he's bowing in a way that we reserve for bowing to God, to angels, even though they are angels of God. It's almost like a critique. All of this is a critique of Lot. What food was offered? Okay, so he offers, so Avraham offers, and he says, ma'at mayim, yeah? What does he give them? When he actually gives them the food, what food does he serve them? He serves them cakes, milk, steak, and whatever, lots of different things. A tender calf. It's like a, I don't know what you call it, sirloin steak or something like that. Tender, sorry. And yeah, that's another. You have to. That's another whole subject. How they could eat milk and milk. But you can see. Okay, look at this. Okay, look at Avraham. He says, "I'm going to give you get a bit of water and a little bit of bread," and he gives them an actual feast, not a feast. And the Gemara in Baba Metzia, source 11, Sadikim omrim ma'at va'osim harbeh. The righteous people offer. They say, I'll try and pick you up if I possibly can. Not like, don't worry, I'll be outside with my limousine, and then don't overpromise and underdeliver. Avraham was the archetype of someone who said a little and did a lot. And in Pirkei Avos we say, Emor ma'at va'aseh harbeh. Say a little and do a lot. Don't have to be such a big mouth. Say you're going to do things and not do it. Let's learn from Avraham. I'll do my best. If I can, I'll be there. Don't say, I'm definitely going to be there with bells. Doesn't go like that. What can we learn from all this? We haven't got time for family participation. I'll stay behind if anybody wants to hear about that a little bit later. Chazal, the rabbis, are encouraging us to look at these two stories. The words are so similar. They're begging us to look, to compare and contrast the behaviour. So what can we make from all of this? What is going on? So the Rambam passed away in the middle of the 1200s. The famous philosopher who wrote the Mishneh Torah, who codified the Jewish laws, tells us that Lot went to live in Sodom. And Sodom was known to be as an inhospitable place. I'm looking now at source 13 on, not the back page, the one from the back page, that it's a natural tendency for a man to be influenced in his ideas and his conduct by his fellows and associates, by his friends, and to follow the habits of those nearby. Therefore, the Rambam tells us, it's necessary for a person to be in the company of righteous, to sit with wise people in order to learn from their conduct, and distance themselves from evildoers who do not follow the path of who follow the path of darkness, and don't stay near them in order not to learn from their ways. Avraham and Lot in last week's Sedra, which I don't know who mentioned it, was it you, Sam, who spoke about Lot and Avraham split up in Parshas Lech Lecha, right? They split up and they said, Avraham said, I can't do this. You do your own thing. They split up, but he said to Lot, you choose where you want to go and I'll go in the other direction. And Lot chooses, of all places, Sodom. Sodom is not hospitable. But yet, Lot learned from Avraham's house. He knew how to behave. Now, I would like to suggest that his behaviour was habitual and not internal. He didn't have the perfect mindset of someone who was hospitable. He even was so habituated that he was willing to risk his own life, but nevertheless, he, so to speak, copied what Uncle Avraham had taught him. And we see later on his descendants, I'm not going to go through it, but his descendants became the Ammonites and the Moabites, and they were inhospitable. They didn't even meet us in the desert, which is like almost like the Warsaw Geneva Conventions of war, how you would treat people with the basics of bread and water. They weren't involved in the dispute, but they didn't come out with bread and water. I'd like to suggest that in modern day psychology, there's a man, his name was Albert Bandura. He only passed away quite recently, but in 1961, he developed something called the social learning theory. And I've got a minute of the clip. We're running out of time, but I found it, so I'll show it to you. They developed something called the Bobo Doll experiment. And what they did was, you'll see on the video, they showed a Bobo Doll, and they showed children with an adult like showing aggression and behaving not nicely to the Bobo Doll. And then they left this Bobo Doll with the children. So I'll just put this on for 1 minute and then we'll finish up. 1 second.
So what Vayeira did is he put an adult in the room with a child and a bunch of toys, including something he called the Bobo Doll, which is a giant inflatable doll. Then what happened after about a minute, the adult unexpectedly started beating up the doll in really quite a vicious manner, shouting, screaming, kicking, hitting with a hammer, and went on like this for about 10 minutes. What would the child do if after watching the adult they were left in a room on their own with the same toys? Ooh, she really is going through it. She's doing exactly the same as she saw the adult do. She's lifted the doll up and now she's really hammering him. She's got a little hammer out, she's looking good at his toes now.
I'm going to leave that there, but if you want to watch the rest of that video, because if you're interested in social theory and social psychology, for those people who don't know how to do it, if you take your phone and you see this little QR code here, and you try and take a picture, don't do it now, Mickey. If you look at this little picture, then then it will open up to the page of the video that I just showed you. And I find.
Is there a control group
I'm sorry.
in this video?
Yeah, they did lots of different things. He was a very highly respected psychologist. What he did was that he did adults showing. They even did it with like women and young girls, and how was it? What happens if they showed a control group of children who were just given the doll and a few other toys in the room? What they did without someone showing them what to do before. So that's
Question.
sorry.
That was my question.
But there are a lot. They were showing about how they did a lot of experiments about it. How someone who learns behaviour from someone else, social learning theory, you can read all about it. It's fascinating. How it is that someone could behave in a certain way. And we see that Lot risked his life, but his hospitality was perhaps disingenuous. He wasn't genuine in the way he was hospitable, although we see he risked his life, and that was amazing. He was conditioned. It's almost like someone who learns to do something, and they've learned how to do it, and they've forgotten that you also need to use your brain. And Lot, I think he was a nice person. He did invite the strangers in, but we see he has a bit of a warped sense of his life, and we see that the rabbis are asking us to do a close reading of the chapter, of the story of where he was hospitable, and begging us to look at Avraham and saying, hold on a minute, he's sort of copying Avraham, but he didn't quite get it right. And in our own lives, when we do things, are we doing it? Are we getting it right? Are we doing things in the nicest, best way? Obviously, Lot, I'm not criticising him, he lived in Sodom, but he made a choice to live in Sodom. He didn't have to live there. He made that choice. And then he had to live with the repercussions of his choice. But what I would like to suggest is he was hospitable to these angels, or these men, whoever he saw them as. But he learnt how to behave almost like he was conditioned, like a Pavlovian dog, but he didn't quite have the the right intention behind his hospitality, even though he risked his life, and his life was at risk, but it's his own choice for choosing to live in that place. And he learned, his behaviour was learned from Avraham, and he wasn't quite so genuine. He didn't quite have the right intentions. If anybody's got any more questions or anything they want to say, I'm happy to stay behind.